Jake Morrison's hands trembled as he stared into the darkness below. The black pony had been right all along. 25 feet down, something moved in the shadows. Something that made his breath catch and his heart shatter. He'd sealed this well 3 years ago, the same week he buried his grief. Now, Shadow stood beside him, ears forward, as if saying, "I tried to tell you." What Jake saw at the bottom made him drop to his knees. The leather collar gleamed in the lantern light, and he recognized it instantly. His brother's name was etched on the brass plate. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Stay with us until the end. This journey will touch your heart. And comment below with the city you're watching from, so we can see how far this story travels. Now, let's continue. Shadow hadn't eaten in 3 days. Jake Morrison stood in his Montana ranch yard, watching the black pony refuse the oats he'd brought. The animal didn't even lower his head to sniff them. His eyes stayed fixed on that damned well. "Come on, boy," Jake said, his voice rough. "You're gonna make yourself sick." Shadow's ears flicked back, acknowledging the sound, but he didn't move, didn't look away from the old stone structure 30 yards away. Jake set the bucket down hard. "It's been 5 days now. 5 days of this nonsense." The pony pawed at the ground. Once, twice, 3 times, then went still again, staring at the sealed well like it held the answers to questions Jake couldn't hear. "There's nothing down there," Jake said, more to himself than the horse. "Been sealed for 3 years. Nothing but darkness and old stones." But Shadow knew different. Jake could see it in the tension of the animal's neck, the rigid set of his shoulders. This wasn't stubbornness. This was purpose. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead, though the morning air was cool. At 43, he should have been running this ranch with confidence. Instead, he spent his days talking to a horse who wouldn't listen and avoiding the memories that lived in every corner of this place. "Your brother would have figured this out already," he muttered. The words hit harder than he expected. Thomas. God, how long since he'd said the name out loud? The neighbors had stopped mentioning him after the first year. Probably thought it was kindness, letting Jake forget. As if he could forget. Shadow suddenly whinnied, sharp and urgent. The sound cut through Jake's thoughts like a knife. "What?" Jake demanded, walking closer. "What do you want me to do?" The pony turned his head, looked directly at Jake with those dark, intelligent eyes, then back at the well. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. "No, absolutely not." Shadow stamped both front hooves. "That well's been sealed since old Henderson's boy almost fell in. Remember? We all agreed it was too dangerous to leave open." But even as Jake said it, he remembered who'd insisted on sealing it most strongly. Himself. A week after Thomas died. When everything that looked like a dark hole reminded him of the mine shaft that had collapsed on his brother. "I'm not opening it," Jake said firmly. Shadow lowered his head and let out a sound Jake had never heard from him before. A low, almost mournful groan that raised the hair on Jake's arms. "Jesus, Shadow, you're spooking me." The pony walked to the well, put his muzzle against the weathered wooden planks that covered it, and breathed out slowly. Then he turned back to Jake and waited. Jake's chest tightened. 6 months ago, he'd found Shadow half dead in a ravine, leg torn open by barbed wire. The pony had been Thomas's horse originally, before Jake bought him at an estate sale, not knowing the connection. He'd nursed Shadow back to health, and they'd been inseparable since. "You really want me to open this thing?" Jake asked quietly. Shadow didn't move, just waited. Jake ran his hand through his dark brown hair, knocking his tan hat askew. His clean-shaven jaw clenched. Thomas used to tease him about shaving every day, even out here where nobody cared. "You always gotta look proper, Jake," Thomas would laugh, "like the Queen of England might drop by for tea." "Respectability costs nothing," Jake had replied, same as always. "Neither does living a little," Thomas had shot back. That conversation had been their last real one. The morning before Thomas left for the Colorado silver mine, before the argument that Jake replayed every night in the dark. "Too dangerous," Jake had said. "Those mines are death traps." "You're too cautious, Jake. Too afraid to live." "I'm being realistic." "You're being a coward." The words had hung between them like smoke. Thomas had left angry. Jake had let him go without apology, without saying what mattered. 3 weeks later, the telegram came. Cave-in. Thomas Morrison deceased. Body recovered. Jake shook his head hard, forcing the memories back. Not doing this. Not today. But Shadow hadn't given up. The pony walked to Jake's barn, stood by the tool shed, and waited again. "You're serious," Jake breathed. Shadow nodded, actually nodded, like he understood every word. Jake's hands were shaking now. "What's down there, boy? What do you hear?" Because that was it, wasn't it? Shadow heard something. Something Jake's human ears couldn't catch. Something that had kept the animal standing vigil for 5 solid days without rest. Jake walked slowly to the well. The wooden planks were thick, weathered gray from Montana weather. He'd sealed them himself with iron bands and railroad spikes. Built to last. Built to forget. He knelt and pressed his ear against the wood. Silence. "Nothing," he told Shadow. "I don't hear anything." Shadow pawed the ground insistently. Jake closed his eyes, listened harder. Beyond the wind, beyond the distant creek, beyond his own thundering heartbeat. There. So faint, he almost missed it. A sound. Not quite a whimper, not quite a scratch. Something alive. Something desperate. "Oh, God," Jake whispered. He ran to the barn, Shadow right behind him. Grabbed the crowbar and hammer. His hands fumbled with the tools. When had they started shaking this badly? Back at the well, he wedged the crowbar under the first iron band. The metal resisted, rusted into place by 3 years of weather. "Come on," Jake grunted, putting his weight into it. The band gave with a screech. Jake worked faster, prying up the second band, then the third. Sweat poured down his face despite the cool air. Shadow stayed close, breath hot on Jake's neck, encouraging him. The first plank came free. Stale air rushed up, carrying a smell that made Jake's stomach turn. Death and dampness and something else. Something animal. "Hello?" Jake called down. "Is someone there?" His voice echoed back, swallowed by darkness. Shadow pushed his muzzle against Jake's shoulder. "I'm going," Jake said. "I'm going." He pulled away the second plank. More light penetrated the darkness. He could see maybe 10 feet down, but the well went deeper. 25 feet, if he remembered right. "Hello?" he called again. A sound came back. Weak, barely there, but definitely real. Jake's breath caught. "Hold on, I'm coming down." He ran for rope, his mind racing. What could survive down there? A raccoon? A fox? The well had been sealed tight. How would anything get in? Unless it had been there before he sealed it. 3 years. Nothing could live 3 years without food or water. But the sound had been real. Shadow's obsession had been real. Jake's hands worked automatically, tying knots he'd learned as a boy. Thomas had taught him most of these knots. Thomas, who'd been fearless about heights, about dark places, about anything Jake feared. "Bet you wouldn't hesitate now," Jake said to the empty air. "Bet you'd already be down there." The rope was ready. Jake tied it around his waist, secured the other end to Shadow's saddle horn. The pony was strong enough to hold his weight. "If this rope breaks," Jake told Shadow, "you back up slow. Understand?" Shadow's eyes were steady. Jake grabbed the lantern, lit it with trembling fingers, and attached it to his belt. Then he lowered himself over the rim of the well. The stone walls were slick with moss. His boots struggled to find purchase. The rope bit into his waist as he descended, hand over hand, boots scraping against centuries-old rock. 10 feet down, the temperature dropped. The air felt thick, hard to breathe. 15 feet, and doubt crept in. What was he doing? This was insane. Shadow was just a horse, probably heard mice or echoes. 20 feet, and the lantern light caught something at the bottom. Jake froze. There, in the small circle of light, matted with dirt and barely moving, a wolf pup. Maybe 8 weeks old. Ribs showing through mangy fur, eyes barely open. But that wasn't what made Jake's heart stop. Next to the pup, half buried in debris, was a leather collar. Brown leather, brass buckle, nameplate gleaming despite the grime. Jake's vision blurred. He knew that collar. He'd seen Thomas wear it around camp, had teased him about looking like he was training a dog instead of befriending a wild wolf. "Scout," Jake whispered. The nameplate read, "Scout, property of Thomas Morrison." Thomas's wolf, the one he'd written about in letters. "She follows me everywhere, Jake. Reminds me of how we used to explore as boys. She's wild, but she trusts me. I'm going to bring her home." But Thomas never came home, and Scout never made it to Montana. Except somehow, here was her pup, 25 feet down a sealed well, with Thomas's collar. Jake's knees hit the well bottom. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The pup whimpered and tried to crawl away, too weak to move more than inches. "Easy," Jake choked out. "Easy, little one." The wolf pup's eyes were Thomas's eyes, the same warm brown, the same trust buried under fear. Jake picked up the collar with shaking hands. The leather was cracked but intact. Thomas's handwriting on the back. "To Scout, my faithful friend. TM 1880. 3 years ago. The year Thomas died." "How?" Jake breathed. "How did you get here?" The pup whimpered again, and Jake understood with crystal clarity. This was Thomas's last connection to the world. His love, his legacy, somehow finding its way to the only family Thomas had left. And Jake had almost left it to die. "Not this time," Jake said, voice breaking. "Not this time, brother." He scooped the pup into his arms, felt how light she was, how close to death. She didn't fight him, just buried her tiny muzzle against his chest and breathed. Jake looked up at the circle of sky 25 feet above. Shadow's dark head peered over the edge, silhouetted against blue. "Good boy," Jake called up, tears streaming down his face. "You were right. You were right all along." Now came the hard part, getting them both out alive. The rope groaned under Jake's weight. He'd fashioned a sling from his shirt, wrapped the wolf pup against his chest, and now both hands gripped the rope so hard his knuckles had gone white. "Shadow, hold steady," he called up. The pony's response was immediate, backing up slowly, keeping tension perfect. The rope lifted Jake inch by inch. 5 feet off the bottom, Jake's boot slipped on moss. He swung hard into the wall, shoulder cracking against stone. Pain exploded down his arm. "God!" He bit off the curse, tightening his grip on the pup. She whimpered against his chest. "I've got you," Jake gasped. "I've got you." 10 feet up, the rope creaked. One strand popped with a sound like a gunshot. Jake's heart stopped. "Shadow, stop!" The pony froze instantly. Jake hung motionless, barely breathing. The rope was older than he'd thought. How long had it been in that barn? 5 years? 10? Another strand gave way with a sharp crack. No, no, no! The pup began to squirm, sensing his panic. Easy, little one. Stay still. But she was frightened now, pushing against the makeshift sling. Her tiny claws dug into Jake's skin through the thin fabric. Please, Jake whispered. Please don't move. His mind raced. 15 feet to go. The rope wouldn't make it, not with both their weights. Thomas's voice echoed in his memory. You overthink everything, Jake. Sometimes you just gotta move. Jake looked up at Shadow's silhouette, then down at the pup pressed against his racing heart. All right, he said quietly. All right, brother. I hear you. He unwrapped the sling with one hand, holding the rope with the other. His arms screamed in protest. Shadow, he called, voice steady now. I'm sending her up first. You pull. Gentle. Understand? The pony's ears twitched. Jake secured the pup in the sling, tested the knots twice, then tied it to the rope above his head. She looked at him with those brown eyes, Thomas's eyes, and something in Jake's chest cracked open. You're going home, he told her. Your mama's boy made sure of it. He gave the rope 2 sharp tugs. Shadow began pulling. The pup rose slowly, swinging slightly. Jake watched her ascend, his throat tight. 10 feet. 12. 15. Then she was at the top. Shadow grabbed the sling carefully with his teeth and pulled her over the rim. Jake hung alone in the darkness. The rope, freed of the pup's weight, had stopped fraying. But Jake's arms were shaking badly now. The fall had done something to his shoulder. Every movement sent fire down his spine. Your turn, he muttered. He pulled himself up, hand over hand. His boots found cracks in the stone wall, taking some of the weight off his arms. 3 feet. 5 feet. At 10 feet, his shoulder gave out. Jake's right hand slipped. He swung sideways, slamming into the wall again. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. Shadow! But the pony had already adjusted, backing up faster to compensate for the sudden shift. Jake's left hand was slipping now. Sweat made his palms slick. He couldn't feel his fingers anymore. Not like this, he gasped. Not after... His hand lost its grip. For one terrible second, Jake fell. Then the rope caught him around the waist, nearly cutting him in half with the force. He swung wildly, hitting the wall twice before catching himself with his boots. Above him, Shadow was pulling with everything he had. Jake could hear the pony's labored breathing, the scrape of hooves against dirt as he backed up. Good boy, Jake choked out. Good. Another rope strand snapped. Jake looked up. He could see sky now. 10 feet. That's all. 10 more feet. Thomas, he said to the darkness, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I let you go angry. I'm sorry I never said... The rope jerked upward hard. Shadow had changed tactics, moving faster. 5 feet. Jake's hand found the rim of the well. Stone bit into his palm. He pulled, using his legs to push against the wall. 3 feet. His shoulders cleared the top. 1 foot. Jake threw his weight forward, rolling over the rim and onto solid ground. The rope went slack. He lay gasping, staring up at Montana sky. Shadow stood over him, nostrils flaring, sides heaving. You did it, Jake breathed. You stubborn, beautiful animal. You did it. The pup crawled toward him, weak but determined. She collapsed against his chest, right over his heart. Jake wrapped his arms around her and wept. The tears came hard. 3 years of grief pouring out all at once. For Thomas. For the words unsaid. For the brother who died, thinking Jake didn't care. "I did care," Jake sobbed. "I cared so much, it scared me." Shadow lowered his head and breathed warm air across them both. When Jake could finally move, he sat up carefully. His shoulder throbbed. Blood seeped through his torn shirt. But the pup was alive in his arms, and that was all that mattered. "We need to get you fed," he told her. She licked his hand weakly. Jake tried to stand and nearly fell. His ankle had twisted during the climb. He hadn't even felt it happen. "Great," he muttered. Shadow moved beside him immediately, positioning himself so Jake could lean against his shoulder. "Thanks, boy." Together, they limped toward the cabin. The pup stayed cradled against Jake's chest, her breathing shallow but steady. Inside, Jake laid her on Thomas's old blanket, the one his brother had left behind when he went to Colorado. It still smelled like him, leather and tobacco and something uniquely Thomas. The pup burrowed into it, whimpering. "I know," Jake said softly. "I miss him too." He heated broth on the stove, added a little water, let it cool. The pup could barely lift her head, but when Jake brought the bowl close, instinct took over. She lapped weakly, then stronger, then with desperate hunger. "Easy," Jake warned. "You'll make yourself sick." But she kept drinking until the bowl was empty. Jake examined her while she rested, ribs showing, matted fur, but no major injuries. She'd survived on rainwater that had seeped through the well's stone cracks, nothing else. "How long were you down there?" he asked. She looked at him with those knowing eyes. Jake picked up Thomas's collar again, studying it in the lamplight. The back inscription was longer than he'd first seen. He turned it over. His breath caught. Below Thomas's original message, in different handwriting, someone had scratched new words into the brass. "Scout died birthing this pup. I tried to bring her to you like Thomas asked. Failed. She ran. God forgive me. Miller, June 1883. Jake's hands shook. Miller. He knew that name. Thomas's mining partner. The one who'd been with him when the shaft collapsed. June 1883. 3 months ago. The pup had been running for 3 months, from Colorado to Montana. Following what? Instinct? Thomas's scent on the collar? Some connection Jake couldn't understand. "You came all this way," Jake whispered. The pup's tail moved slightly. Jake thought about the sealed well, about Shadow's obsession, about timing. "When did you fall in?" he asked, though she couldn't answer. "How long were you down there calling?" Shadow appeared in the doorway, watching them both. "You heard her before I sealed it, didn't you?" Jake said suddenly. "That's why you've been standing guard. You knew she was trapped." The pony didn't move. "But that means—" Jake's throat closed. "That means she was down there when I sealed the well. I trapped her. I almost killed her." The realization hit like a physical blow. 3 years ago, grief-blind and desperate to hide anything that reminded him of loss, Jake had sealed the well without checking, without listening, and he'd trapped Thomas's last gift inside. "Oh, God," Jake breathed. "Thomas, I'm so sorry." The pup crawled into his lap, as if forgiving him for something she didn't understand. Shadow walked over and laid his head on Jake's shoulder. They sat like that for a long time, man, horse, and wolf pup, while the Montana sun moved across the cabin floor, and Jake, finally let himself grieve properly. When darkness came, Jake built up the fire and settled the pup in a wooden crate lined with soft blankets. She protested initially, whimpering. "I'll be right here," Jake promised. "I'm not leaving you." He pulled Thomas's old rocking chair close and sat down heavily. His body ached everywhere. His shoulder needed stitching. His ankle needed wrapping. But none of that mattered as much as the tiny creature sleeping in Thomas's blanket. "I'll call you Echo," Jake said quietly, "because you're Thomas's voice coming back to me, his love echoing forward." Echo's breathing deepened into sleep. Jake opened the drawer beside the chair, the one he hadn't touched in 3 years, and pulled out Thomas's letters. The ones that had arrived after his death, written weeks before, but delayed in delivery. His hands trembled as he unfolded the first one. "Dear Jake," it began, "I know you're angry about our fight. I know you think I'm reckless. Maybe I am. But I need you to understand something. I'm not running from you. I'm running toward something, toward life, toward possibility, toward the man I want to be." Jake's vision blurred. "Scout follows me everywhere now. She's wild, but loyal. Reminds me of you, actually. You're the most loyal person I know, even when it costs you. Especially when it costs you." A tear dropped onto the paper. "I hope someday you'll forgive yourself for caring so much, Jake. That's not weakness. That's your strength. And I love you for it. Always have, always will. Your brother, Thomas." Jake folded the letter carefully and pressed it to his chest. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The first rain in months was coming. Shadow stood at the door, looking out at the gathering storm. Echo slept on, safe at last. And Jake Morrison sat in his dead brother's chair, holding his dead brother's words, protecting his dead brother's legacy, and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. The storm broke just before dawn. Rain hammered the cabin roof, and Jake woke with a gasp, his shoulder screaming. He'd fallen asleep in the chair, Thomas's letters scattered across his lap. Echo was whimpering. "Hey, hey," Jake said, pushing through the pain to kneel beside her crate. "You're all right." But she wasn't. Her breathing came too fast, her body trembling. "No," Jake whispered. "Don't you dare. Not after all this." He scooped her up, felt how hot she was. Fever, the well water, or infection, or just too many days without food. Shadow appeared at his side, pressing close. "I need Doc Harrison," Jake said. The nearest doctor was 12 miles away in town. 12 miles of mud and flooding creeks in this storm. Jake's hands shook as he wrapped Echo in blankets. His ankle couldn't hold his weight properly. His shoulder was useless. But he moved anyway, driven by something stronger than pain. "We're not losing her," he told Shadow. "You hear me? We're not." He managed to saddle Shadow one-handed, biting back curses. Echo went into a saddlebag, wrapped tight. Jake pulled himself up, nearly blacking out from the shoulder pain. The ride was hell. Rain blinded them. Lightning cracked close enough to make Shadow shy. The creek that separated Jake's ranch from town had swollen to a raging torrent. Jake stared at the brown water churning past. "We have to cross," he said. Shadow balked. I know it's dangerous, but she's dying." The pony looked back at him, then at the saddlebag where Echo lay barely breathing. Shadow stepped into the water. The current hit them immediately, trying to sweep them downstream. Shadow fought it, muscles straining. Water rose to Jake's knees, then his waist. "Come on, boy, come on!" Halfway across, Shadow stumbled on a submerged rock. Jake grabbed the saddle horn with his good hand, holding Echo's bag with the other. "Don't fall. Please don't fall." Shadow recovered, pushing forward. 3 more steps. 5. Then solid ground. They made it. Town was deserted in the storm. Jake pounded on Doc Harrison's door, hard enough to split his knuckles. "Doc, open up!" Nothing. "Harrison!" The door flew open. Doc Harrison stood there in his nightshirt, gray hair wild. "Jake Morrison? What in God's name?" "She's dying," Jake interrupted, pulling Echo from the bag. "Help her!" Harrison took one look and ushered them inside. "What is it?" "Wolf pup. Been without food or water for days. Now she's got fever." Harrison's hands were already moving, examining Echo with practiced efficiency. "How'd you find a wolf pup?" "She found me," Jake said roughly. The doctor didn't ask more questions. He worked fast, cleaning wounds Jake hadn't even seen, forcing water down Echo's throat, mixing some kind of medicine. "This is Thomas's collar," Harrison said quietly, touching the leather around Echo's neck. Jake's throat closed. "Yeah. I heard about Scout. Miller came through here months back, half crazy, looking for this pup. Said Thomas made him promise to bring her to you." "Miller was here?" "Left something for you, actually. I've been holding it." Harrison went to his desk, still working on Echo with one hand, while rifling through papers with the other. He pulled out an envelope. "Said to give it to you if he didn't make it back. He was sick, Jake. Real sick." Jake's hands trembled as he took the envelope. Miller's handwriting on the front. "For Jake Morrison, Thomas's brother." "Is he—" "Dead. 2 weeks after he left. Pneumonia took him." Jake sank into a chair. Miller had died trying to deliver Thomas's wolf. The guilt was crushing. "Open it," Harrison said gently, working a needle through Echo's torn ear. Jake broke the seal. "Jake Morrison," the letter began. "You don't know me, but I knew your brother better than most. Thomas saved my life in that mine. When the tunnel collapsed, he pushed me clear. Took the rock that should have killed me. His last words were about 2 things: Scout and you." Jake couldn't breathe. He said, "Make sure Scout gets to Jake. He'll understand what it means. And tell him I wasn't angry. Tell him I love him. I tried, Jake. God knows I tried. But Scout died birthing this pup, and the pup ran. I've been chasing her for months. If you're reading this, I failed. I'm sorry. Thomas deserved better. You deserved better. The pup's all that's left of him. Take care of her. She's got his heart. Robert Miller." The paper crumpled in Jake's fist. "He saved Miller," Jake choked out. "He died saving someone else." Harrison's eyes were wet. "That sounds like Thomas. And I let him leave angry. I called him reckless. Jake." Harrison's voice was firm. "Thomas knew you loved him. Brothers fight. It's what they do. But he knew." Echo whimpered, and both men turned to her. "Is she going to make it?" Jake asked. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. Next few hours will tell." Jake pulled his chair close and took Echo's tiny paw in his hand. "You fight," he whispered. "Your mama fought to bring you into this world. Thomas fought to get you home. You fight too." Shadow pushed his head through the doorway, watching. The hours crawled past. Harrison gave Echo medicine every 20 minutes. Jake held her, talking constantly. "Thomas used to tell me stories," Jake said softly, "about when we were boys. We'd explore every inch of our daddy's ranch. He was fearless even then. Jumped off the barn roof once, broke his arm. Mama was furious, but Thomas just laughed. Said it was worth it to know what flying felt like." Echo's breathing steadied slightly. "That's it," Jake encouraged. "You listen to these stories. You've got his blood in you." "She's responding," Harrison said, surprised. "Keep talking." So Jake talked. About Thomas learning to ride. About their first cattle drive. About the time Thomas had stayed up all night nursing a sick calf, refusing to leave until it recovered. "You're a lot like him," Jake told Echo. "Stubborn, brave, too stubborn to die." As dawn broke, Echo's fever finally broke with it. She opened her eyes, those brown, familiar eyes, and looked at Jake like she recognized him. "There you are," Jake breathed. "There's Thomas's girl." Harrison sagged with relief. "She's going to make it." Jake buried his face in Echo's fur and wept again. But these were different tears. Grateful tears. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sun broke through the clouds, painting the muddy street gold. Shadow nickered softly. "We can go home now," Jake told him. "We can take her home." But before they could leave, the doctor's door opened again. A young man stood there, maybe 22, soaked to the bone and breathing hard like he'd been running. "Is there a Jake Morrison here?" he asked. "Someone said they saw him ride in." Jake stood slowly. "I'm Morrison." The young man's eyes widened. He had dark hair and warm brown eyes, and something about his face made Jake's heart stop. "My name is Samuel," the young man said. "Samuel Morrison. Thomas Morrison was my father." The world tilted. "What?" Jake whispered. "I've been searching for you for 6 months. My mother died last winter. Before she passed, she told me about Thomas, about you. She said if anything happened to her, I should find my father's brother." Jake couldn't move. Couldn't think. "Thomas had a son," he said numbly. "He supported us," Samuel continued, "sent money every month. But he wanted me to have a normal life," he said. "Didn't want me growing up in mining camps. So he stayed away. He never told me. He planned to. My mother said he was going to bring me to meet you after his last job. But then—" "The mine," Jake finished. Samuel nodded, tears in his eyes. "I would have come sooner, but I was finishing school. And honestly, I was scared. Scared you wouldn't want me. Scared I was intruding on your grief." Jake looked at this boy, this man, who had Thomas's eyes and Thomas's face, and probably Thomas's brave, foolish heart. "You're not intruding," Jake said hoarsely. "You're—" His voice broke. "Your family." Samuel's face crumpled. "He talked about you all the time in his letters. Said you were the best man he knew. Said you taught him everything that mattered." "He taught me more," Jake managed. They stood there, uncle and nephew meeting for the first time, while Echo whimpered softly and Shadow watched from the doorway, and Doc Harrison quietly wiped his eyes. "I have something for you," Samuel said, pulling a bundle from his coat. "Mother kept all his letters. I thought you should have them." Jake took the package with shaking hands. Dozens of letters, all addressed to Sarah and Samuel Morrison. "There's more," Samuel said hesitantly. "Thomas bought land, 500 acres bordering your ranch. He registered it in both our names, yours and mine. Said it was our inheritance, our future." Jake's legs nearly gave out. "He bought land for us? He wanted us to ranch together. You, me, and him. A family operation." Samuel's voice cracked. He had it all planned out. Jake thought about all the times he told Thomas to be more careful, more cautious. And all along, Thomas had been building a future for them. "The land is still yours," Samuel said quickly. "I'm not here to take anything. I just wanted to meet you, to know my father's family." Jake looked at this young man who'd traveled alone to find an uncle he'd never met, who'd lost his mother and his father and was still standing here, still hoping. Thomas's son, Thomas's legacy, Thomas's future. "That land belongs to both of us," Jake said firmly, "just like Thomas wanted. And you're not going anywhere." Samuel's eyes widened. "You mean—" "I mean you're home," Jake said. "If you want to be." Samuel didn't answer with words. He just stepped forward and hugged Jake hard. Jake held his nephew and felt pieces of his broken heart start to fit back together. Echo barked, her first real sound, like she approved. The ride back to the ranch was quiet at first. Samuel rode behind Jake on Shadow, one arm steadying Echo in her sling. The pup had fallen asleep against Samuel's chest, and something about that simple trust made Jake's throat tight.
"She took to you fast," Jake said over his shoulder.
"Animals always did," Samuel replied. "Father said I got that from him." Jake's hands tightened on the reins. "What else did he say about me?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. "That you saved his life more times than he could count. That you were the reason he knew how to be good." "That's not true. Thomas was good all on his own." "He said you'd say that too." Jake almost smiled. Almost. They crested the hill overlooking the ranch, and Samuel drew in a sharp breath. "This is it?" "Home," Jake said simply. But when they got closer, something was wrong. The cabin door stood open. Jake never left it open. "Stay here," he told Samuel, sliding off Shadow. "What's wrong?" "Just stay." Jake approached carefully, his good hand moving to the knife at his belt. His shoulder screamed in protest, but he ignored it. The cabin had been searched, not violently, but thoroughly. Drawers open, blankets moved, Thomas's letters. Jake stepped onto the porch. "Nothing to talk about, Cyrus. Get off my land. Those maps belong to me. Thomas stole company property." "Thomas found those deposits on public land. They're not yours." Blackwell's smile was cold. "The boy has them, doesn't he? Thomas's bastard." Samuel stepped forward, anger flashing. "Don't you dare!" Jake grabbed his arm. "Inside. Now. But now." Samuel retreated, but his jaw was set. Echo growled softly in his arms, the first time she'd shown aggression. "Hand over the maps," Blackwell said. "I'll pay fair price." "Nothing you offer is fair." "Then maybe I'll take them." The two men flanking Blackwell moved their hands to their guns. Shadow moved between them and the porch, ears pinned back. "You kill me," Jake said evenly, "and every lawman in Montana will be here by morning. Doc Harrison knows you came looking. Half the town saw you ride out." Blackwell hesitated. "Besides," Jake continued, "those maps are worthless to you now. Land's been claimed, registered in Samuel Morrison's name. Thomas made sure of it before he died." It was a bluff. Jake had no idea if Thomas had actually filed the claims. But Blackwell's face darkened, and Jake knew he'd guessed right. "You're lying." "Am I? Check the land office yourself. Thomas wasn't stupid, Cyrus. He knew you'd come eventually." One of Blackwell's men leaned over and whispered something. Blackwell's expression shifted, calculation replacing anger. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Yes, it is. You wanted the silver. Thomas claimed it legally. Now it belongs to his son. You've got no claim. That silver's worth hundreds of thousands. You really think I'll just walk away?" "I think you'll do what's legal," Jake said. "Or I'll make sure everyone knows you killed Thomas to get those maps." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Careful, Morrison. That's slander." "Is it? Miller told me what happened before he died. Told Doc Harrison, too, about how the mine collapse wasn't an accident, about how someone cut the support beams the night before." Jake was improvising now, piecing together suspicions he'd carried for 3 years. But Blackwell's face had gone pale. "You have no proof." "Don't I? Miller kept a journal, detailed everything. It's with the marshal now." Another lie. But Blackwell couldn't know that. The mine owner stared at Jake for a long moment. Then he jerked his horse's reins. "You'll regret this," he said. "I've regretted plenty. This won't be one of them." Blackwell and his men rode off, but Jake knew it wasn't finished. Men like Blackwell didn't give up on fortunes. Inside, Samuel was shaking. "He killed my father. You just said—" I don't know if it's true, Jake admitted, but it felt true. And Thomas did write about concerns, about safety issues being ignored, about fights with management. Then we have to tell someone, the marshal, the territorial governor, someone. With what proof? Miller's dead. Thomas is dead. It's just our word. Samuel's fists clenched. So he gets away with it? Maybe. Maybe not. Jake pulled out the land deed Samuel had brought. But if Thomas claimed that silver legally, then you inherit it. That's something Blackwell can't touch. I don't care about the money. I care about justice for my father. Jake saw Thomas in every line of Samuel's face. That same righteous anger. That same refusal to back down. Your father would care about you being safe, Jake said quietly. Would care about you having a future. What kind of future is it if I don't fight for him? The kind where you survive, where you build something, where his sacrifice means something. Samuel turned away, struggling. Echo whimpered in his arms. I need air, Samuel said roughly, walking out. Jake let him go. Some things a man had to work through alone. He was gathering the scattered letters when he found one he hadn't seen before. Sealed envelope, addressed to him in Thomas's handwriting. Different from the others. His hand shook as he opened it. Jake, it read, if you're reading this, I'm probably dead. And if I'm dead, it probably wasn't an accident. Blackwell's been getting desperate. The silver I found is bigger than anyone knows. Enough to make Montana one of the richest territories in the West. Enough to kill for. I've made arrangements. The land is claimed in Samuel's name. The maps are with him. But Jake, there's something else. Something I never told you because I was ashamed. The cave-in that killed me was my fault. I found an unstable vein and pushed too hard, too fast, just like you always said I would. You were right, brother. You were right about everything. Take care of my boy. Teach him to be careful like you. Teach him to think before he leaps. Maybe he'll live longer than I did. I love you. I'm sorry. Thomas. Jake read it 3 times before the words sank in. Thomas hadn't been murdered. He'd been reckless, just like Jake had always feared. But he'd also been brave, and loving, and human. Jake folded the letter and put it in his pocket. Some truths Samuel didn't need to know. Outside, he found his nephew sitting by the well. Shadow and Echo were with him, both pressed close. Your father left you something, Jake said, sitting down despite his aching shoulder. 500 acres of the richest silver deposits in Montana, maybe in the whole West. Samuel didn't look up. I'd trade it all to have him back. I know. Do you? Do you really? Jake looked at the well where Echo had almost died, where he'd almost given up, where Shadow had refused to let him. Yeah, he said. I really do. They sat in silence. Shadow nudged Jake's hand. Echo crawled into Samuel's lap. He wrote about you, Samuel said finally, in every letter. Said you were the strongest man he knew, not because you weren't afraid, but because you were afraid and did things anyway. Jake's throat closed. Said he wanted to be like you when he grew up, even though you were only 4 years older. Samuel laughed wetly. Said you raised him more than your father did. Thomas raised himself, Jake managed. That's not how he saw it. A hawk circled overhead. The sun was setting, painting the land in shades of gold and amber. I want to stay, Samuel said quietly. Build the ranch Thomas planned. Work the silver claim. Make something that matters. It's dangerous work, miming. Then teach me to be careful, like Father wanted. Jake looked at this young man who'd lost everything and was still willing to hope, still willing to build. All right, he said. We'll do it together. Samuel's smile was pure Thomas. Partners? Family, Jake corrected. They shook hands there beside the well, sealing a promise neither of them fully understood yet. Echo barked approval. Shadow tossed his head like he'd known all along this was how it would end. Inside the cabin, Jake showed Samuel Thomas's room. "It's yours now." Samuel touched the wooden frame, the quilt, the small carved animals on the shelf. "These are beautiful. Thomas made them, when we were boys. He never mentioned he could carve." "There's a lot you didn't know about him. A lot I didn't know either." Jake pulled out the bundle of letters. "But we can learn together." They stayed up all night reading. Thomas's words filled the cabin like his voice, his dreams, his fears, his love for his son and his brother. As dawn broke, Echo curled up between them, and Shadow stood guard at the door. And Jake Morrison realized something profound. He'd spent 3 years believing he'd lost everything. But grief had been hiding gifts he couldn't see. A pony who wouldn't stop watching. A wolf who wouldn't stop fighting. A nephew who'd traveled hundreds of miles, looking for family. A brother whose love echoed forward, even in death. "Thank you, Thomas," Jake whispered to the morning light. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Outside, Montana was waking up. The well stood sealed and marked. The land stretched rich with possibility. And somewhere, Jake was certain, Thomas was smiling. 3 weeks passed before Blackwell made his move. Jake was teaching Samuel how to mend fence when Shadow's ears went flat. The pony stamped twice, looking toward the eastern ridge. "Company," Jake said quietly. Samuel straightened, squinting. "How many?" "Can't tell yet, but Shadow only acts like this when trouble's coming." Echo appeared from the barn, fur bristling. At 3 months old, she'd grown strong and protective. She positioned herself between Samuel and the ridge, growling low. "Easy, girl," Samuel said. But Echo wouldn't settle. 5 riders crested the hill. Blackwell in front, flanked by men who looked like they'd been hired for violence, not conversation. Jake's stomach dropped. "Samuel, get in the house. Take Echo." "I'm not leaving you." "That wasn't a request." "And I'm not a child." Samuel's jaw set in that stubborn way that was pure Thomas. "This is my fight too." Jake wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. The riders were approaching fast. Blackwell dismounted 20 feet from the porch. His men stayed mounted, hands resting on gun belts. "Morning, Jake," Blackwell said pleasantly. "Beautiful day." "State your business, Cyrus." "I've been to the land office. Turns out Thomas did file those claims after all. Very thorough, your brother." Jake's hand moved closer to his belt knife. "Then you know you've got no legal right to them." "Legal," Blackwell smiled. "Funny word. See, I've been thinking about legality. About how a bastard child might not have legitimate claim to inheritance. About how those claims might be challenged in territorial court." Samuel's fists clenched. "Samuel Morrison is Thomas's son," Jake said evenly. "Blood doesn't lie." "Blood can be disputed, especially when the father's dead and can't verify paternity." "You son of a—" "Easy, Jake." Blackwell's smile widened. "I'm here to make a deal. A generous deal. I'll buy the claims. $50,000. More money than you'll see in 10 lifetimes. Not for sale." Think about the boy. That money could set him up. Education, business opportunities, a real future. He's got a future here. "Ranching?" Blackwell laughed. "You're one bad winter from losing everything. But this offer, this secures his life." Samuel stepped forward. "My father died for this land, for what he found. I'm not selling it to the man who might have killed him." The air went cold. "Careful, boy," one of Blackwell's men said. But Blackwell held up a hand. Did Thomas tell you that? That I killed him? He told me enough. He told you he was reckless, that he pushed into unstable tunnels against my warnings, that he got himself killed chasing glory. The words hit Samuel like a slap. That's a lie, he said, but his voice wavered. Jake's heart twisted. He'd kept Thomas's final letter secret, the one where Thomas admitted fault. Now Blackwell was weaponizing the truth. Is it? Blackwell pulled out a document. This is the safety report from the day of the collapse. Thomas Morrison signed off on entering that tunnel despite warnings, despite being told it wasn't stable. He chose to go in anyway. Samuel's face went white. You're lying. Show him, Jake. Show him Thomas's last letter, the one where he admits it was his fault. Jake's blood turned to ice. How did Blackwell know about that letter? One of my men saw you reading it through your window, Blackwell said, reading Jake's expression. Thomas Morrison was a reckless fool who got himself killed, and now you're raising his bastard to be just as stupid. Samuel lunged.
Jake caught him, but barely. Don't. That's what he wants. He's lying about my father.
No, Jake said quietly. He's not. Samuel froze. What? Thomas was reckless. He did push too hard. That part's true. Then why didn't you tell me? Because it doesn't matter. What matters is Thomas loved you. He died trying to secure your future. The how doesn't change the why. Blackwell clapped slowly. Touching, really. But it doesn't change facts. Thomas was careless. The boy's illegitimate. And I'm offering fair money for worthless claims. Worthless? Jake's voice was steel. Then why are you here? Blackwell's smile faltered. If those claims are worthless, you'd have walked away weeks ago. But you're desperate, which means Thomas found something big, something you need. Careful, Morrison. How big is it, Cyrus? How much silver did Thomas find? Blackwell's hand moved to his gun. Shadow moved faster, charging forward with teeth bared. The pony slammed into Blackwell, knocking him backward into the dirt. Shadow, hold! Jake commanded. The pony stopped, but didn't retreat, standing over Blackwell with murder in his eyes. Blackwell's men drew their weapons. Stand down, Jake said calmly, or that pony tears your boss's throat out. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Echo did something none of them expected. She walked calmly to Blackwell, sniffed him once, and urinated on his boot. The tension shattered. One of Blackwell's men snorted, another coughed to cover a laugh. Blackwell's face went purple with rage. You're all dead men. Maybe, Jake said, but you'll die first. Shadow, release. The pony backed up slowly, still watching Blackwell. The mine owner stood, brushing dirt from his expensive coat. This isn't over. Actually, it is, a new voice said. Everyone turned. A man in a marshal's uniform rode into the yard, followed by Doc Harrison and 3 other townsmen.
Marshal Crenshaw, Jake said, surprised.
Mr. Morrison, Mr. Blackwell. The marshal's hand rested on his gun. I believe you're trespassing. This is business, Blackwell snapped. This is attempted claim jumping. Doc Harrison here filed a complaint about your threats, about your men watching the Morrison property. That's a lie. Is it? Marshal Crenshaw pulled out a notebook. Because I've got testimony from 6 witnesses who saw your men in town asking questions about the Morrison claims, about Thomas Morrison's death, about ways to invalidate inheritance. Blackwell's face shifted. Witnesses can be mistaken. Not when one of them is Robert Miller's widow. She came forward yesterday with her husband's journal. The one detailing every safety violation at your mine, every corner you cut, every man you endangered. Jake's breath caught. Miller had kept a journal. His bluff to Blackwell had been real all along. "That proves nothing," Blackwell said. "It proves you had motive to want Thomas Morrison dead. He was documenting everything, planning to report you to the territorial government. He died in a cave-in. In a tunnel you ordered him to check. Against regulations. Against safety protocols." The marshal's voice was hard. "Mrs. Miller has correspondence proving you threatened her husband. Threatened Thomas. Threatened anyone who might expose your operation." Samuel stepped forward. "Did you kill my father?" Blackwell looked at him with something like pity. "Your father killed himself. He was too brave for his own good, too honest, too stubborn to walk away when he should have." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you'll get." "Cyrus Blackwell," Marshal Crenshaw said formally, "you're under arrest for criminal negligence, reckless endangerment, and conspiracy to defraud. You have the right to—" Blackwell's hand flashed to his gun. Shadow charged again. Echo lunged at the nearest hired man. Jake tackled Samuel to the ground as gunfire erupted. The fight lasted seconds. The marshal and his deputies were professionals. Blackwell's hired men were bullies, not soldiers. When the smoke cleared, 2 of Blackwell's men were wounded, 1 was dead, and Blackwell himself was on his knees with his hands bound. "It's over," the marshal said. Jake helped Samuel to his feet. The boy was shaking but unhurt. "You all right?" Jake asked. "Is it true? Did Father know he was in danger?" "Probably." "Then why did he go into that tunnel?" Jake pulled out Thomas's last letter and handed it to Samuel. "Read it. Know the truth." Samuel read with tears streaming down his face. When he finished, his hands were shaking. "He blamed himself," Samuel whispered. "He was wrong to. Thomas was brave. Sometimes bravery looks like recklessness, but it's still brave. Blackwell pushed him into that tunnel, threatened his job if he didn't. And Thomas went anyway, knowing the risk, because he was trying to protect you, trying to secure your future before reporting Blackwell." Samuel looked at the letter again. "He said to teach me to be careful, like you." "Yeah. But he also said to teach me to be brave, like him." Jake's throat closed. "Yeah. So which one should I be?" Jake pulled his nephew close. "Both. You be both." They held each other while the marshal led Blackwell away, and Doc Harrison checked everyone for injuries, and Shadow and Echo stood guard over their family. Later that night, after the marshal had taken statements and left, Jake and Samuel sat on the porch. Echo slept between them, full-grown now and fiercely loyal. Shadow grazed nearby, always watching. "What do we do now?" Samuel asked. "We work the claims, carefully, safely, the way Thomas would have wanted after he learned his lesson." "The silver could make us rich." "It could, or it could kill us trying. That's why we're going to be smart about it. Hire good men, follow regulations, build something that lasts." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "I wish he was here to see it." "Me too. But he is, in a way. Through you. Through Echo. Through the land he claimed and the future he built." "You think he's proud of us?" Jake thought about Thomas's letters, about his love for his son, about his faith in his brother. "Yeah," he said. "I think he's proud as hell." They sat in comfortable silence. The Montana night was clear and full of stars. "Uncle Jake?" Samuel said finally. "Yeah?" "Thank you for taking me in, for not turning me away when I showed up." "Your family. That's what family does." "Father said you'd say that too." Jake smiled. "Smart man, your father. Reckless, but smart." Echo stirred, looked up at them both, then settled back to sleep. Shadow nickered softly and walked to the sealed well. He stood there for a moment, silhouetted against the starlight, then turned back to the porch and lay down. His watch was over. "Do you think he knew?" Samuel asked. "Shadow, that he was bringing us together?" Jake watched the black pony who'd refused to give up, who'd stood vigil for days, who'd saved both their lives. "Animals know things we don't," he said. "They see connections we miss." Shadow knew something was down that well worth saving. Knew Echo would lead us to you. Knew Thomas's love was still reaching forward. "That sounds impossible." "So does a wolf pup surviving 3 months alone and finding her way to her father's family. So does a nephew I never knew existed, showing up the exact moment I needed him. So does a brother's love outlasting death." Samuel nodded slowly. "Maybe impossible is just what we call things we don't understand yet." "Maybe." They sat until the stars began to fade and dawn painted the horizon gold. Then they rose together and began the work of building the future Thomas had dreamed of. The ranch grew. The silver claims proved even richer than Thomas had believed. Samuel learned ranching and mining both, careful and brave in equal measure. Echo grew into a magnificent wolf, gentle with family and fierce with threats. Shadow lived to be 23, surrounded by the family he'd helped create, and was buried with honor beside the well that had changed everything. But that morning, as Jake and Samuel stood together watching the sun rise over Montana, none of them knew what was coming. They only knew they had each other. They had Thomas's legacy. They had hope. "To Thomas," Jake said quietly, raising his coffee cup. "To Father," Samuel echoed. Somewhere in the morning light, Jake could almost hear his brother's laugh, could almost feel his approval, could almost believe that love really did echo forward forever, carried by a black pony's stubborn watch and a wolf pup's impossible journey and a nephew's brave search for home. Some gifts arrive wrapped in grief. Some wells hold more than water. Some animals understand love better than men. And sometimes, just sometimes, the deepest darkness leads to the brightest dawn. Jake Morrison had spent 3 years learning to live with loss. Now, standing beside his brother's son, with his brother's wolf at his feet, and his brother's horse by his side, he finally understood the difference between surviving and living, between existing and thriving, between being alone and being family. The well stood sealed and marked, a memorial to the place where everything changed, where a pony's stubborn love had saved them all, where Thomas's final gift had come home at last. And every morning for the rest of his life, Jake would stand there with Samuel and remember the day grief transformed into grace, loss became legacy, and a cowboy's tears watered the seeds of hope his brother had planted long ago.